Hello, Tubby and Coos fans. It's me, Candace. I am here with an author event. I'm really excited, as always, for the author event that we have today because we have some sci-fi juggernauts for you, and I am excited for them to be here. Today, we have Gregory Benford and Larry Niven, and they've written a lot of sci-fi books, but today we're going to talk about Glorious, which is a book in their Bowl of Heaven series, which you may have read. Gregory Benford is a recipient of the United Nations Medal for Literature and the author of more than 20 novels, including the Nebula Award-winning Timescape, which sells well here. He teaches physics at the University of California. We also have Larry Niven, who is the award-winning author of the RINGWORLD series, which I know a lot of you have read as well, along with many other SFF masterpieces. He has received the Nebula Award, 5 Hugos, 4 Locus Awards, 2 Ditmars, the Prometheus, and the Robert A. Heinlein Award, among other honors. So I'm really excited to have both of them with us today to talk about their new book, Glorious. Welcome, Larry, and welcome, Gregory. Thank you all so much for being here.
Hi, glad to read.
And I believe they have a PowerPoint that they're gonna give us like sort of a talk. So I will let y'all get to it. I can pull that up on my screen and
Anyone hear me?
go for it.
Something of an echo. Get closer to the mic, I think. Okay, here's the first slide. This is going to be about big smart objects, which all 3 Bowl of Heaven novels are about. Big constructions built by aliens to house enormous populations. So the solution to the housing problem is that you build something on an astronomical scale instead of just putting up more skyscrapers. So we got into this business because, of course, Larry, to some good extent, helped invent the field. Next. With good old RINGWORLD. And RINGWORLD is a slice out of a Dyson sphere. Next. Because a Dyson sphere is, as envisioned by Freeman Dyson, was really a swarm of objects, not a solid hollow sphere, that captures all the irradiation from a star, the sun. And as you can see in this sketch, it's on a huge scale, the scale of basically the orbit of the Earth around the sun. So the surface temperature of the inside of the sphere is about that which you're experiencing in New Orleans right now. I grew up near New Orleans, so I know what it's like. Yeah, the only thing about the Dyson sphere is it doesn't have that humidity. Larry did this way back in 1970, half a century ago. And he and I started talking over a decade ago about doing something even more spectacular, which I worked on the physics of. Next. Oh, a little bit more about Dyson here in the next slide. You can start building a Dyson sphere by building the struts, so to speak, on a scale of a solar system, and then figure out the dynamics, the shear stress, and so forth. This is an imaginary is solar power satellites and habitats. The first thing you would put up is some pieces, and then over many, many centuries, you build the whole thing. Next, you can make it like this. As it becomes more rigid, you can put it in different orbits around the star, for example. It's all about putting together big things. Next, like this. Here's this concluding piece, you might say, of a Dyson sphere. I've squeezed it a little bit. It's not really this ellipsoid that I depicted. And the point is to capture all the energy from the star, which is a lot, of course, and not waste it by shedding it into interstellar space. Next. And I would point out, there's a search going on at the University of California, my university, at the Lick Observatory in Northern California, to try to find Dyson spheres. So far, no detections, but the real problem is that there are many, many infrared objects in the night sky, so it's hard to pick out one that might be an artificial construction. It goes with the game in astronomy. It's not easy to see even spectacularly large things at a great distance. Next. So here's where the thing comes from. Whoop. This whole field started out being called big dome object fiction. But the distinction we're going to make here is that these objects aren't dumb. They are not stable. They have to be managed. And you can't just let them go and hope that they'll stay that way. And the whole point is to try to invoke the enormous, some call it the technological sublime of having a huge construction that dwarfs all of us, mere humans, and yet was built by some intelligence. I remember when I first left Alabama with my mother and twin brother to go to occupy Japan, because my father was a professional Army officer. We changed trains in Chicago. It was the first time I'd seen really big skyscrapers. And my mother said, "Boy, doesn't that make you feel really small and insignificant to see these huge buildings?" And I remember being puzzled and finally saying, "Mom, but we built these things." Who's more significant, the product or the producer? So I was a smart ass even then, beginning a long career. Next. Of course, these ideas after Larry's RINGWORLD spun into things like the ONeill cylinder colonies, where you put a lot of people in a rotating cylinder near the Earth, and they have a habitat with all the resources of outer space available. You can leave the habitat and be in zero G. You can get free sunlight. You can spin it to whatever local gravity you want on the outer shell of the spinning cylinder, and you're halfway to everywhere, as Robert A. Heinlein used to say. Next. Oh, and Arthur C. Clarke's Rendezvous with Rama, which is another spinning cylinder. A really good book, by the way. I urge you to read. The sequels aren't quite so good. They were not really written by Arthur. And it's very mysterious. It comes into the solar system, falls through. Humans board it. They find life forms. They have strange technologies. And it just keeps on going and flies out of the solar system. Apparently, it was just doing a delta V maneuver. It was not particularly interested in us, which is kind of humiliating. Next. So the trick is that we start the bowl of heaven with this starship, which is a ram scoop, burning the interstellar hydrogen, on its way to a star which has a planet called Glory. You can see that there's a viable biosphere there, but it's about 40 light years away, so it's a very long, centuries-long voyage, and the crew is in cold sleep until something strange appears alongside them, also going apparently toward Glory. Next. And this is it. This is an object the size of the orbit of the Earth. And there's the star out there, forming a jet that goes through what we call the knothole at the bottom of this bowl of heaven. And that blue perimeter you see there, that's the ocean, an ocean the size of the Earth's orbit, which has little storms on it, you can see. So suddenly the starship, comes out in front of this so we can actually see it, because from behind it doesn't really particularly look interesting. Remember, the ship is running on automatic for the most part, and it awakens some crew because it knows, the AI running the ship, that this is not in the plan, right? So what the hell is it? Well, the starship is also not functioning very well. They're having trouble with fuel problems and repairs. They could really use a break. So they investigate in hopes of resources. Next. And as they draw alongside, here's what it looks like. You can see the jet going through the knothole. You can see the reflecting mirrors around the knothole that focus the star's own sunlight back on the star to produce the jet. You use the star's own radiance to make the jet, which makes the system move. This whole contraption is completely unstable because the only reason the bowl, which is built on a gigantic scale, of course, is following the star is gravitation. But at the same time, the star is being driven away by the jet. So it's a balancing act. Look at it this way. When you go out for a walk, how do you move forward? Well, you fall forward and catch yourself. That's what we call walking. The rest of the animals on this planet have 4 legs because they're afraid of falling. Managing a 2-legged gait is extremely rare in the animal kingdom, and certainly nothing as big as us. The only thing as big or bigger than us that had 2 legs also had a convenient tail, like kangaroos or a Tyrannosaurus Rex, to keep them stable. We are very unusual because our method of moving forward is to fall and catch ourselves, which is a great metaphor, I think, for human history. So they decide to land on this thing. Oh, and some close-ups of it. Next. A lot of this was put together by Larry and I in innumerable discussions over intoxicating tax-deductible meals. And we figured out this is how you design the centrifugal gravity from the spin of the bowl. And so there are regions of near zero gravity up near the knothole and 0.8 G right at the perimeter of the ocean. Notice it's not as tough to get around as it is on the Earth, which is 1 G, of course. So there are all these different kinds of habitats depending on what kind of biosphere lesser gravity produces. And throughout all 3 books, you get to see various kinds of aliens and biospheres that we dreamed up and imagined with the help of Don Davis, whose signature is right there at the bottom left of the slide, who did all the art we're going to show you, or almost all. Next. So you get closer, you can see all these huge storms down on the ocean, and then these quadrants of both agriculture and some desert near the ocean. See, there's a beach near the ocean zone. But the beach zone, by the way, is this bigger than the Earth in area and extent. So this is big scale construction. All done without the single environmental impact report by somebody. And part of the whole mystery is who in the hell made this thing and why. Well, of course, the reason is obvious. They're cruising around the galaxy. You're taking your entire habitat with you when you cruise among the stars, which means really long-term planning. So whatever civilization built this must last very, very long times. This has always been an issue in the whole search for extraterrestrial intelligence is what's the lifespan of a civilization? Well, on the Earth is no better than about 1,000 years. The oldest continuous still existing human institution is the Catholic Church. But they didn't build this. So you see, envisioning a thing like this implies a society that's vastly stable over very long time scales. So that folds into the mystery too. Next, as you get further in, you'll find out that, oh yeah, how do you get in? Well, the ship, which is called Sunseeker, flies through the knothole because they find out the perimeter of the bowl is heavily defended with gamma ray lasers. So they fly against the jet into the bowl. I've had a whole career in plasma physics and both experiment and theory, and a lot of it's been devoted to the dynamics of jets, such as those that comes from the perimeters of black holes and the accretion disks around them. And so I used all of that technology and all that stuff in here. You'll notice that there's a helical coiling to this jet, which is what confines it. It's confined by magnetic fields. The whole configuration is actually controlled by the use of magnetic fields. So it plainly, even looking over at the side to the right, you can see big helical loops to generate magnetic fields. So that's what runs the show here is magnetic controls. Now, next, here Here's what it is like when you get down to the surface of the bowl itself. You'll notice you can see in the distance the huge ocean ring, which dominates the sky. And then lower left, reflecting mirrors that focus on the star itself. And you can see the jet up there. It's a huge thing with an atmosphere. Look at the clouds and things on the ground. So it's a very, very contrived habitat. It's a complete habitat with lots of natural zones, like parks in a huge city. Next. Here it is from the ground. You can still see in the distance that blue-white ocean band. And then you see a thing we call zigzag trees, which have evolved there to deal with the shifting winds and turbulence of the bowl. You can even see a tiny little human walking down toward the lower left. And on the lower right, you see this strange tubular thing in the great distance. This thing is many miles away, so it's got to be huge. Next, and this is what it looks like when you get close to it. It looks like a fish with strange fins because it's actually a living being that works like a blimp. And the things that run this colossal living blimp are symbiotic with the blimp. So we're envisioning here a life form that's about a mile or two long and floats in the atmosphere and can propel itself. And it's unlike anything that we have on the Earth. There are no giant balloon birds in the Earth, but we figured there could be one on this thing because this is a nice, safe way to get along and get around and be safe too, because they also have defensive weapons. You eventually, in volume 2 of the series, titled Ship Star, you actually get on board one of these things and see how they work, which is kind of interesting to be inside a living thing that's bigger than an ocean liner. Next. And then in volume 3, called Glorious, just out last week, you get to see this thing, which is the goal. This is what the Glorian system looks like. And from the Earth, studying this system 42 light years away, you couldn't really figure out that it was actually two co-orbiting worlds with a huge structure built between them. This is the second giant smart object in the whole series. Notice there's a tube between the two. How could this come to be? Well, think about Pluto, which I still think is a planet, and its moon, Charon, which is unusually large for a moon. They're tide-locked to each other. Each sees the other's face, just one half of the world. Now, on the Earth, we see only one face of the moon because the moon is tide-locked to us. But the Earth is not tide-locked to the moon, so we spin around, but nonetheless, we only get to see one side of the moon. On these planets, they're both tide-locked to each other, just like Pluto and Charon, and that is what gave us the idea for this structure. So once you've got that advantage, you can build an enormous structure in between them, most of which is in zero G. And to get up and down, you can run elevators, giant elevators running on gas pressure, because gravitation is a conservative force. So what goes up must come down, and you can have one elevator going up, pressured by the pressure conveyed from another tube that is going down. That's how they save energy on this structure. But the point is, it's an enormous biosphere of a completely different kind. It's several thousand miles across and has that bulge in it, which is where all the spacecraft dock. So when the humans come into this system, they dock there and then explore it. And it turns out to be very, very strange, with yet again, strange kind of creatures that we made up. Larry and I must have invented at least a couple of dozen different kinds of aliens here. Aliens that appear to be rocks, aliens that are like extremely smart carnivorous kangaroos, aliens that have shapes that are actually not even easy to describe because you can't quite make out what they are. Next, for example, and this is the last slide, here's a thing that appears in the sky repeatedly, except it always looks different shape, has different colors. This art, by the way, is done by Brenda Guerre, who is a very talented line artist. And all the way through the book, you wonder, what are these things? Because occasionally they act, they seem to have electrical charge available and everything, but they don't do anything. They just watch them. Well, this is a signature of an even higher life form, which is keeping track of the humans. Because, well, again, who built this thing? Well, you find out in the third volume that it's actually a collaboration among several different kinds of intelligent species. We humans have one smart species, us. We have the dolphins, who we haven't even figured out how to communicate with very well. We have elephants who have some clear intelligence, and we have the other apes. We're apes, after all. And we can't communicate with them very well. With chimpanzees, we have managed to develop a several hundred word vocabulary, but we're not great communicators, even with the stuff in our own biosphere. So this set of novels actually confronts the issue of how the hell do you talk to really different aliens, and how do you even know who they or what they are? So all these thread through this whole novel series, which took us a decade to write. It took us a long time to figure it out, right, Larry? I mean, sometimes I thought we'd never be through. Larry? Can Larry hear me?
I'm not sure he's there. He's on the stream. So Larry, can you hear us? Maybe he can't hear us, but he's there.
He turned on the mic earlier. It worked.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, we got any questions from your gang?
Let's see. If anyone has any questions, they'll definitely be willing to answer them. I haven't seen any questions so far. If I see any, I'll put it up on the screen for y'all. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to just type them in and I'll show them on the screen as you have them. My question is, I know y'all both have been writing these kind of sci-fi books forever. So how much research do you have to do for new ones? Like, do you still do a lot of research, or I assume you know a lot of stuff at this point, right?
Well, yeah. After all, I have a PhD in theoretical physics, and I've done a lot of experimental physics. So my novels tend to be about scientists discovering something new and how scientists respond to it. And this has just been a lucky break for me, because basically nobody was doing this. When I came into the field, I said, hey, look, I can just write about what I do every day. I'm a professional. And it's always been a fun hobby and a very useful one. I never thought that it would be so successful. But from the very beginning, editors wanted to buy my stuff. I wrote short stories. I've published over 200 short stories and 35 novels. The trick is that try to do what other people aren't doing. Don't follow trends. I don't actually teach writing fiction, but although I've taught in the English department for 8 years, but I taught how to write essays in journalism, which is at least something I know how to teach. It's not clear to me how to teach people to write fiction, even though I've done a lot of it. But one thing is, don't follow trends. Do your own thing. Use your own aspect. Like I had a friend who said, I'd like to write something, but I don't see how my occupation could intersect anything I could write about. And I said, this was at a book signing. I said, well, what do you do? And he said, I'm a marksman, a professional munitions guy. And I said, you don't see how you could use that? I mean, it's not like you're raising vegetables or something. This is inherently dramatic.
Right.
He's a weapons specialist. So actually, I got information from him I could use in one of my novels. So I realized that you just try to use your own life and the people you've met and so forth. For example, my novel, The Berlin Project, is an alternative history of the Manhattan Project, because I happen to know most of the major figures in the Manhattan Project. I was a postdoc at the Livermore Labs for Edward Teller, one of the two inventors of the hydrogen bomb. And Harold Urey who invented the process of separating isotopes, and therefore uranium isotopes, in the Manhattan Project, was on my thesis committee at UC San Diego. And I knew him quite well. Maria Geppert-Mayer, who taught me nuclear physics, which I used later at Livermore Labs, she was in the Manhattan Project. I had great stories to tell about it. So I used that in the novel. I mean, life presents you with found information, and you should use it. It always pays off in the long run to use things that you know directly from experience instead of trying to make stuff up. You can make a really good SF novel by adding a tiny element that's new and use the background of everything else that you really know. So writing novels about how scientists deal with new discoveries was natural to me, and largely unknown to most people who write science fiction. So it's been a fun career in this sense. Certainly. Yeah. I never thought I would be so successful. Of course, Larry has a degree in mathematics.
I know. Larry, can you hear us now?
He's not responding.
No, I don't know if he can hear us. Can you hear us, Larry? Okay, he's waving, but I don't know. I'm not sure if he can hear us or not.
Me either.
But can you? Oh, no, he said all as well. He just doesn't want to interrupt. Yeah, I had a question, Larry, about research. Go ahead.
What?
Hello, you both. I've missed most of this lecture, but Greg is good at that. I've seen the lecture before and participated. What's going on now? Are we in the question period?
Yeah, I had asked a question about research because I know, you both know so much about this science, all the science stuff, that I was just wondering how much research you have to do now, or if you have to do research anymore because y'all know so much.
I didn't need to do much research working with Greg on the subject we followed. I've been up to speed on big structures for decades now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he wrote the integral trees, for example, a completely new kind of structure in orbit around an exotic neutron star, as I recall. An amazing novel. The two of them, actually.
One of my better ideas.
Yeah, it was astonishing. You have to read a lot of the novel to even understand how that environment works. But it's right. I mean, the physics is right. Well, it's kind of like the RINGWORLD, which actually is not stable, but you can correct it with little adjusting rockets at the perimeter.
I did have to do a lot of research for RINGWORLD.
Right. Because it's all,
I needed.
Almost nothing that we build is inherently stable. I mean, airplanes aren't. They have to keep being corrected. Cars aren't, really. You got to drive them carefully. Even skyscrapers eventually fall apart. I mean, one of the things that nobody much thinks of in skyscrapers is that they're actually giant lightning rods. So you really got to ground them very well. Otherwise, you're going to fry the entire building. By the way, that's true of airplanes, too. You're flying an airplane, it gets hit by lightning, you can feel the effect, but the electronic charge stays on the outside of the airplane. That's why it doesn't destroy the electronics on the inside. Nonetheless, if you have an antenna that's outside and radiating, you're giving it a path into the plane, and it can just blow all your electronics, which has happened. So we'd like to construct our nice, safe, comfortable, fun things, but almost none of them will stand around and work unattended. Everything's got to be managed, and that will be true of any advanced civilization. The sure sign that a society is going to pieces, I noticed in the 1980s when I was in the Soviet Union, is when people stop doing their maintenance. And then you know it's doomed. I wrote a report on that to the CIA. It said, this system can't last, it's falling apart.
I was also wondering, y'all have such cool, I mean, both of you in the separate books that you write, but also in these books, y'all have such cool, like, alien stuff, right? Like you have all these different types of creatures that live on your planets. Like, where do you get the ideas for all these different aliens from?
Regular application of alcohol helps.
Greg, you dream of new creatures while you're learning biology in class.
Yes, right. But in this one, we have a thing called the ice mines, which are intelligent beings that operate at very low temperatures and have very long-term memories because they're seldom disturbed because they're far from suns. But they're on the outside of the bowl, the humans discover. And it turns out that they are the kind of the librarians and the secret controllers of the little place. But nobody notices them because they're on the outside to keep cold. I mean, I think that was Larry's idea, wasn't it?
I did like the ice mines, best of our aliens.
Yeah. And we have the aliens that appear to be just rocks. You ever think of camouflaging yourself as a rock so nobody ever bothers you?
It's a good idea.
Greg, I had a problem with the rocks. It's hard to believe in them.
Yeah. What was the problem?
You can make a computer, but I can't see one evolving out of
No.
silicon.
That's true. It doesn't evolve from ordinary silicates. You have to build it. But after all, these computers we're using right here are actually smart rocks. I mean, they're running on silicon chips.
Mm-hmm.
But they're doing all this for us. Well, what about when it becomes autonomous? Well, we call that artificial intelligence. Well, what if it becomes embodied? So you don't have a laptop with a screen and all that stuff. You just have this rock over in the corner that takes care of a lot of stuff and does your bookkeeping and who knows. And you make it so smart that you don't even have to pay attention to it. Just like your thermostat, which is also, by the way, a smart rock that runs your temperature gradient. People never think of these distinctions. I like that.
No, yeah, I've never thought about how computers and thermostats are smart rocks, but they are.
Right. My first job right out of high school was at Texas Instruments in Dallas, because my father was based in Dallas. He was the commander of the Texas National Guard, soft duty. They give you in between combat duty, which he did a lot of in the Second World War and the Korean War and the DMZ and all that. Anyway, I realized that this company, which was making transistors, remember transistor radio, was capable of so much more because it was basically just making smart rocks, laying down circuits on silicon bases with copper and other metals. And that was 1959. So I've been interested in all this kind of way of looking at the world ever since. Plus, well, I have an advantage over Larry in that I grew up in the natural world. He grew up in Los Angeles, which is the unnatural world as far as I'm concerned. That's why I live in the High Sierra and live in the beach.
I grew up in not a mansion, but a house, a good-sized house with a trust fund. I'm one of the few science fiction writers who didn't need to get a job for day work to pay their rent.
Right. Well, you spent most of World War II living in the Doheny mansion, right?
Yeah. The Summers.
Yeah.
Summers at Greystone.
Larry's grandfather fired Raymond Chandler from his job for showing up drunk at a Christmas party when he worked for Doheny Oil. Larry's a Doheny. So the point is, he actually grew up in a mansion. I grew up in Fairhope, Alabama, and spent a lot of time on the Fish River where my grandparents lived, across the bay from Mobile. The real natural world, nature of red in tooth and claw. I shot an alligator when I was 9 years old. He was eating the pigs and the chickens, so we had a reason. You could also get a good amount of money out of the leather. I'm not that crazy about eating alligator. Have you ever eaten it?
I have, yeah. It's a fine, like it's not my favorite, but I'll eat it,
It's not veal or anything. It's an oily kind of meat.
Gamey, oily, yeah.
Right.
But fried it's fine, because then you can fry it up and then you don't taste the gaminess as much.
That's right, exactly. And so I grew up killing, everything from squirrels and deer to alligators, because that's how you eat. Also did a lot of fishing and getting oysters and crab. So I grew up in the real world. I regard it as the natural world, which was a gift. I really appreciate that upbringing.
Are you able to use things from that in your books too, like things that you got from, I don't know, fishing and kind of doing things out in nature?
Well, yeah, of course, I could use it automatically just by changing to my original voice.
Everything winds up in a book.
Yeah.
Every time I get sick, so does a character.
Right. If you're a writer, you regard life as basically just raw material for books. But indeed, I'm going to write a novel up ahead called Dark Heaven, which I already published as a novella in a short form, which is set right around Fairhope, Alabama, on the Gulf Coast, after amphibious aliens from Alpha Centauri have come to inhabit our oceans. So, and the prime detective is a a homicide detective on the Mobile police force.
Oh, cool. Larry, what's coming up for you? What is your next book? Do you know yet?
What was that? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just asking what's coming up for you. Do you know, like, what are you working on now that we can look forward to?
I've got a novel going with Stephen Barnes, another frequent collaborator, based on the novels I wrote 30 years ago involving Gil Hamilton, the Amalgamated Regional Militia, which is the United Nations police force.
Right.
It's
another cop.
Now.
It's another cop novel.
Okay.
But Larry, you just had a book come out a month ago with Jerry Purnell and Steve, right? Your novel from a month or so ago with Jerry, the last novel with Jerry Purnell.
Yeah. Just published was the last novel Jerry Purnell and I wrote with Stephen Barnes.
Yeah.
It's the third in a sequel. Sorry, it's the third in a stereo called God's Sons and Starborn.
Right. Steve's a very interesting, creative guy. He was one of the few black SF writers I've done. Well, it's Chip Delaney, of course, and Octavia Butler. But Steve is another person from LA who has a whole lot of street smart stuff that he uses in these novels with Larry and Jerry.
Yeah.
And undoubtedly in the next one.
Steve was from South Central Los Angeles.
Right.
We via the Los Angeles Science Fantasy Society.
Yeah. Solid guy. He's done a lot of stuff. He's got some TV show he's working on now. I don't know what it is.
That's cool. So tell us, I think this will be the last question. So tell us about what it's like to collaborate. I know, you collaborate together, and I know y'all have collaborated with other folks as well. How is collaborative writing different from writing on your own? And do you find one to be more difficult than the other? Clearly y'all like collaborating, so.
Yes.
Collaboration is about as natural as working with on your own. We always, in the science fiction field, we always discuss ideas. We love it.
Right.
That's
Science fiction,
how collaboration grows.
and it's uniquely so. There's no other branch of literature, genre or otherwise, that has many collaborations.
Yeah.
And I think the deep reason is that science fiction first invented fandom, which is talking about ideas. Fanzines go all the way back to the 1930s. Hell, I published 29 issues of a fanzine called Void. But the reason for that is because science itself is intrinsically collaborative. The majority of all scientific papers have more than one author. That's not true of fiction at all. Most of this is single author stuff. But science is so embedded into science fiction and science fiction fandom that collaborations are very common. I mean, my own fanzine, Void, had no less than 5 different editors, including my twin brother. But the trick is, in science fiction, you get more ideas by brainstorming, sitting around and tossing stuff around. That's how science works too. I know, I published over 200 scientific papers. And it's ideas at the core of it, which is why science fiction has taken over the popular media, because it actually has some ideas. Whereas most genres are just repeating themselves.
So science fiction, the whole scientific community for centuries has been trying to find out how the universe works. Before that, of course, they knew how the universe worked. It was generated by God.
Yes.
We're looking for details. You can go ahead and believe in God if you like, but the details are still interesting.
Yeah. And God doesn't collaborate.
Same thing.
And Stephanie wants to know, how do you actually work? Do you trade off chapters? Like, how do you actually write the story?
Yeah, we do. We trade chapters and stuff. Yeah. I mean, I often did the first draft, and Larry would do the second, and then we do something about the third, and so on.
Work on each other's text.
Exactly. Yeah. And get together a lot. We've had a large number of tax-deductible dinners. Not an accident. And it's paid off. The books have done very well, sold a lot of copies. And this is the third and last. Although there's a chance, our editor and agent tell us, that Tor might want to do a book of stories set in the Bowl of Heaven context and written by other people with us as the editors. We'll see if that happens. I mean, Larry spawned an enormous number of works out of his Known Space series. I mean, how many Man-Kazin novels?
15 volumes of the Man-Kazin war stories.
Yeah. And that's just part.
Other people than me.
Right. That's just part of the Known Space stuff. You did, was it 3, 4, 5 novels with?
Novels with Greg Lerner, with
that's right, with Lerner, right? I mean, so from a kernel of a good idea, you can generate an enormous amount of fiction, or rather, you can get other people to do it.
Something for me to allow other people into the Man-Kazin wars, and then into Known Space, all of Known Space.
Yes.
It's still forbidden to do anything with the RINGWORLD itself.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
He calls it, and the name of one of his story collections is Playgrounds of the Mind, which is a good way to look at it, I think. You build a jungle gym and other people come and play on it.
Yeah, I like that too. I think it's a great way to look at it. And just to let everyone know, we have been talking about Glorious. So I'm going to put it up on the screen here. So Glorious is the third book in the Bowl of Heaven series, which started with Bowl of Heaven, which is the first book, and Ship Star is the second book. So this is the third and final book in the series, which means you can buy it all and binge it if you haven't read it. It is now complete, so you could get the whole story now as of just a couple of days ago, right? It came out this week, Glorious?
Yes.
So you can now get the whole thing. And of course, we want you to buy it from us if you're watching this for sure. So chubbyandcoos.com and place an order. We can get you a copy. So please get Glorious from us. If you prefer to shop on our bookshop site, you can do that as well and get it shipped directly to you. And, or you can go to our website and order it from us, and we will have it in the store and get it to you as well. So Glorious, again, it's Bowl of Heaven, Ship Star, Glorious. So you can read the whole thing right now, which is the best part, I think. When the last book comes out, you can just read all of it.
I feel the same way.
Well, thank you, Gregory and Larry, for talking to us. I feel like our hard sci-fi fans are this was so interesting. Just all of the details about the bowl and just about hard sci-fi. So this was awesome, and I found it so interesting. So I know our hard sci-fi fans will be really excited too. So thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you everyone for watching. And we will see y'all later. Thank y'all.